was talking through me.
What's the hand moving in the back of Rhonda's?
I've got a little congestion, so I can't talk so loud. We have Chris on the phone, Chris and John on the phone, and we're going to go through the next part of this project. It's the peer review part. So I know that this meeting was originally scheduled on Monday, and we kind of had to move it due to some scheduling conflicts to today. It is being recorded on their end, so your peers that didn't were able to attend today, there'll be a email coming out with the link for the webinar that they can review, and then we're going to have a refresher on October 2nd. Is kind of the next check-in. I think that's at 1 o'clock over in the ASD conference room. So I'm going to go ahead and let Chris get started. There is a sign-in sheet. I'm hoping everybody put their names down so that those who are not in attendance, I can check base with them. So make sure you sign that before you leave today. One other thing before Chris starts, the analysts that are the budget analysts that are in the room, if you do your department's budget or are responsible for submitting it, I'd like to speak to you at the end of this meeting for about 15 minutes. If you can't stay, that's okay. I'll touch base with you later. All right. So Chris, you can go ahead and get started.
All right. Thanks very much. And thanks everybody for being here today for the discussion about peer review. I'll just say I was in Portland last week. I came into town. We have the office in Portland, and my flight got in. It was about 50 degrees and raining and cold. By the time I left, I went to California, where John and I launched a project over the last, yesterday and the day before. And I got back to Denver for, guess what? The arrival of that same storm that was in Portland has now made its way to Denver. And actually, we need the moisture to keep the fires down. But anyway, it's kind of funny how that works, traveling across the country. Today's discussion is about the peer review process. These 5 steps, I'm sure for everybody who's participated in these presentations, you'll be relieved to hear that this is probably the last time that we'll discuss the 5 steps. You've made it this far, and many of you just participated in the program scoring element to it, and I know that some of those scorecards are still coming in, which is fantastic. We'll be so interested to hear about your experiences in program scoring. But as we shift towards peer review, this really does become a fascinating part of the process. Just so everybody has a general idea of what happens after this particular process in peer review, remember the whole intention of peer review is to have a different set of eyes come upon the scores that the departments have given themselves, where we've recognized that initial self-assessment is critical for the process to work. Departments have to have that first opportunity to score their programs. And now as we get into peer review, the objective is to make sure that, kind of like a jury of our peers situation, we can validate those scores. We can have a discussion about it. We can see where the departments were coming from and ask questions that make us.
Chris?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're fading in and out.
Oh, okay.
A little bit over here.
Let's see here.
We got you all the way up. I don't know if it's this.
Yeah. How is this, Paula?
So, one more time.
How is this for volume and clarity?
That's much better.
Okay. I'll just try to speak a little bit closer to the microphone, and sorry about that. But as we get to peer review, again, the entire objective is to make sure that we have this opportunity for those of us who don't provide the programs to talk about them. What you want to have happen at the end of this entire process is that no one has any questions about how the programs ended up being scored. You want to have buy-in as a team, overall as an organization, that scores have taken place consistently and that there's been a review, a step of valid quality control that's taken place. so that when you're looking at that final tool, it's not a question mark in your mind, well, were these programs scored appropriately? So peer review becomes a very fascinating part of the process, and that is the whole point of what we're going to discuss today. Coming out of the peer review process, all programs will end up with a final score. And if you remember from the scorecards that you've just gone through completing, the score indicates the degree of relevance that the program has on all of your results, whether it was on the community side or the governance side, as well as those basic program attributes. So here in this graphic that we continue to show from Boulder, where each one of these lines represented one of their programs, you too will have a program scoring array. John and I will go through the analysis to recognize where are the natural breaks that occur to help us define what is a quartile 1 program, and what scoring range will have meaning for the city of Springfield. How do we break those from quartile 2, 3, and 4? And then the final step will be to assign those program costs so that we can look for the first time at the overall spending array across the city. So by quartile, how are the city's resources being allocated as we sum them up program by program in each quartile? Now, the last element will be the development of the final model. And I think everybody remembers generally how that works. It's going to become a lot more exciting when you actually have your data instead of looking at Boulders or another cities that we've demonstrated before. And that will be the last time that we're on site to present the final tool and walk through each of the department's profiles and teach you how to use it, teach you how to start to use the various filters which drive certain conversations. So that will be the culmination of this work, and we're getting very close. But all right, let's get into this whole process of peer review. And for everybody who took place in scoring, it's going to feel a lot similar. It's just how do we now get on the other side of the table to be able to review scores that about programs that you might not be familiar with. This is the first set of concepts that we like to introduce when we're discussing peer review, that when you went through program scoring, you took what you might call a horizontal perspective at scoring. And what we mean by that is you scored your programs literally horizontally from left to right, focusing on one program at a time and all of the various evaluation criteria. You went through and had the conversation, well, is this program mandated? How do we know? And how mandated is it? What do we know about the degree of reliance that our community has on this particular program? Then you went through each of these scoring categories and then every single one of the results. So you had the broad overall perspective of this program and its overall relevance. In peer review, what we end up doing is taking a more vertical approach where we're only looking at a program in isolation around either a result or a basic program attribute category. So for those of you who are participating on the peer review teams, what you're going to see are the programs that scored against your particular result, and you actually won't be able to see how that program scored in any other category. For the result team that you are participating on, you're going to get a list of all of these programs and the scores that the departments gave themselves towards that one result, and not knowing how the program scored in any other result because it's actually irrelevant to your work. Your sole focus is to say, do we agree? Does this program actually have the degree of impact on our result? Do we know our result inside and out? What more information do we need? And what sort of recommendation are we going to be providing overall? Now, the reason that we break it up this way, and Paula and I were having this conversation earlier, a different kind of approach we could have chosen to take in peer review, is to simply take an entire department, all of their programs and all of their scores, and just give it to another department to score. That could have worked as well. Here's what's fascinating is as we work through this vertical or very limited and focused view of a program on one result, you might have an intuition about a program that you're reviewing that you believe overall for the city, it should be a highly relevant program. Or you might believe overall for the city, you think it's going to end up scoring and becoming less relevant overall. We want to take that opportunity away from you to be able to even consider how the program is going to end up overall across the city, and actually limit your responsibility so that you only have one simple question to answer. Does the program impact the result that we're looking at? And you don't even have to bother yourselves with the overall relevance of the program against all other evaluation criteria. All right. So your role, each of you will be participating on a peer review team. The first role that you have is to become completely familiar with your result team's result map. I'm sure that through the process of program scoring, you became very familiar with the result maps as you were attempting to score your own programs and literally looking for every possible opportunity to demonstrate that, yes, my program has an influence on this result. The result map was your key tool to be able to find a way to give your program the score that it deserves, that's most accurate. As you approach peer review, you're now focusing on the one result that matters most, that you're responsible for reviewing. And again, the first objective is to make sure, am I clear? Am I totally clear on all of these result definitions? Or do I have any questions about interpretation? It's completely appropriate to bring up those conversations with your team even before you launch into all this. Or let me say it another way, you don't want to get to the end of your work in peer review and then find out, oh, wow, we never really agreed on what this particular result definition meant. And now we have to go back and review some of the scores that we might have scored differently. Gain clarity. Really read through the result map that you're working on and be intimately familiar with it, and have that discussion with your peer review team members to make sure that everybody's pretty clear and you're going to be consistent as you go through the process of reviewing programs. Your initial focus in the review is to take a look at all of the programs that scored highly against the result that you're reviewing. You'll actually receive a template, and the programs will be ordered that way. They'll be ordered from highest scores to lowest scores. We do think of it this way, that for the programs that scored themselves low in the process, there could be reason to give them the benefit of the doubt, and therefore we're more concerned with the time that you have, that you absolutely take the opportunity to discuss those high scoring programs. But that being said, every program deserves a thorough review. And to the extent that your team's moving along and you can get into those lower scoring programs, absolutely we want you to review those. And if your team is doing very well, and we see this in other organizations where you're doing just fine, you're making progress, you've gone through all the 4s and 3s, you've actually gone through the 2s and 1s, it's completely appropriate to review the remainder of the programs that scored 0 and be able to have that discussion with your team. Maybe this department completely missed the boat. They did not see the link between their program and the result that we're reviewing, and we believe that they should have scored at least in the low influence range. It's actually okay to review programs that scored 0, but we're going to stage it so that you are definitely reviewing the high scores first. You're making sure you have the time to review some of those lower scores, and then as time permits, having that opportunity to review even the programs that scored 0. You want to make sure that you understand what each program does or what each program provides. And this sounds so obvious, but we've seen it happen so many times where at face value, when you read a program name, it's still unclear what is actually taking place in that program. In other words, don't let yourself assume that you know what the program is all about just by reading the name or by reading the description. If you have some questions, and I'll get into that in one of the slides that's coming up, make sure that you ask about it. So if the program by name makes you feel like I think that I understand it, but it's worthwhile to dig into it, ask the question, because it's impossible to fairly review the program score if we're not 100% sure what this program is all about. And then lastly, your task overall is to simply determine, does the score make sense based on the result definitions in the result map, and overall the program's influence on achieving that particular result. You have the ability in this process to...
Do you guys have any questions so far? Or Jeff, go ahead.
Oh, I've got a question. Jeff Towery, Assistant City Manager. I guess I'm a little troubled by the notion that the team's focus will primarily be on the higher scoring attributes and not everything, because as you indicated, a particular attribute is one of 8 or 10 scores that a program is going to get. And just because a program may have scored a 0 or a 1 in the attribute that the team's looking at, that's not a reflect on where the overall program is going to land when it's said and done. So I guess I don't quite understand the rationale for maybe not getting to programs that score lower.
Oh, and Jeff, I'm glad that you asked, because I clearly wasn't as articulate as I'd hoped to be. It is imperative that all of the scores are reviewed. And we see it as many times throughout the process that you're going to see programs that the department scored themselves a 1 or a 2, and the peer review team is going to increase that score, or the peer review team is going to decrease that score. All of these are going to end up with that thorough review. I just wanted to make it clear that it's take your approach to this to focus on the highest scores first, and then move into that discussion. It ends up being easier. But I'm not trying to say at all, don't take the time to review those low scores. Those are absolutely critical.
Well, except you said if you have time, then review the low scores. So just that was what triggered it for me.
Initially, what they're saying is that if the program scored a 0 in that attribute, they give the department the benefit of the doubt that it is a 0. If there is time at the end, we are asking that you re-review all of those zeros. What we're asking is that you start with the 4s and basically work down. If the program scored anything, right, within a 1 to 4 in that attribute, it will be reviewed.
Yeah.
I think it's what he's saying is that typically what you do is you start at the 4s and work down. The reason being is that you want to, and I'm sure Chris will touch on this, is that when you look at 4s, all of those programs should have some type of similar feel, right?
Yep.
Kind of a check.
Yeah.
So, any other questions before Chris goes on?
Good clarification, Paul, thanks.
Yeah. So, can you guys hear Chris back there okay? Because I know it's kind of, he's in and out. So there is room up at the table if you guys want to come forward. So Chris, go ahead.
All right. As team members, you're absolutely allowed and permitted to ask for more information if you don't know what the program is doing. If you have any question whatsoever or confusion about the program definition, the scope of the program, you're free to ask those sorts of questions. If you don't agree on the influence that the program has overall on the result, you're free to ask questions of the department. Ultimately, if you look at the score and you have questions about that, you're just not sure, you're not coming to agreement, you have every opportunity to ask questions of the department. Now, I'm going to get into a suggestion on how you do that to keep it organized throughout a series of meetings, and also some recommendations on how you go about requesting information of a department so you don't bog everybody's time down, and you do it in an orderly way. And frankly, so you get some documentation of the information that you're learning as well. But just want to make it clear, you're not in a vacuum. Overall, you have to decide as a team whether you agree with the score assigned by the department, or if you'd recommend a change in the score, either increasing the score or decreasing it based on your discussion and review. And therefore, your review has to entail a complete review. You have to be somewhat assured at the end of your work that you've you've been provided the information that you need in order to make a satisfactory recommendation. It's also important to talk about what your role in peer review is not about. And we put this in here because more than likely, one of your conversations is going to stray in this particular direction or another. And keep this slide, even print it out and have it with you so that you can keep each other in line and keep progress going throughout the peer review effort. These are the things that you might be tempted to start to do, and it's just a distraction from the overall effort. The first one there, determine whether the identified results for the city are the right results. So you might be in a conversation, reviewing programs, reviewing your particular result, and you might start to wonder, do we even have the right results identified? For this year's process, you've got to take it that the results have been identified, that they've been defined appropriately. It's completely adequate to voice your concerns at the end of this. Wow, I think we've missed a result. And next year, as we go through it, we should probably talk about it. But it's not part of your role in peer review right now. The second item, redefining the result or changing the definitions on the result map. So sometimes teams are tempted as they're reviewing a program and they're reviewing a result that seems to make sense to them by its name. And you'll ask yourselves, well, it should have an impact on this result, but I just don't see the definition where the correct linkage should be. We've gone through the process of creating result definitions, and that's how the programs were scored. So you got to stick to the current definitions. Again, not to say that this process won't evolve in your future. And if you sense that there's something missing in a result definition, clearly get that sort of information to Paula or keep track of it, that this is an observation that your team had. But as you're reviewing the programs, you got to stick with the definitions of the result map as they've been created. The third one, assessing the overall relevance of any of your programs being reviewed. And what we mean, yes?
You're fading in and out again.
You know what I might do is I wonder if I can just try calling in. Would you mind if I pause this for just a moment?
No, go for it.
All right.
So I'm gonna, while you do that, I'm gonna talk to them a little bit about this.
Welcome to GoToMeeting, online meetings made easy. There is one other caller on the call.
Okay. So I want to be very clear, that's not me. All right? So if you have a question about a program, it's not me that you talk to. It's the people on the list of the core members. So if you're a core team member, you're the one that they're going to contact. Okay? It's not the executives, it's not the steering committee, it's not Bob, it's not me, it's you. You're the one who made the descriptions, you're the one who did the scoring, so you're the one that they're going to be reaching out to. So I've already expressed this very heavily with the finance department, is that you're going to have to be able to, if they ask you why you gave this a score, or why what the program description means, you're going to have to be able to communicate your decisions to them. Okay? I know that some of the bigger departments had multiple people doing it, and we may need to list out who they should contact for some of those programs. But I want to make it very clear that it's not me that you're going to be contacting, it's your peers. All right? So now this other thing, the things that you're not going to be doing, or things that you shouldn't be doing in the peer review. I do want to hear your comments. I want to, please tell me if you think that the right results and the results map needed to be defined for the second year, okay? We are going at the end of this whole process, we will be doing or asking you guys, kind of comment on what you thought of the priority-based budgeting process. But I do want to hear from you. We are going to change it at this point, but I do want to hear the concerns, and I do want to hear your recommendations for year 2. Right? So Chris, are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back on. How is this for volume and clarity?
No, it's not working.
It's not working. Man, this is so strange.
On his end, I'm pretty sure it's on his end.
So this is worse.
Are you a handset? What are you?
Is this worse?
Yeah, that's better.
This is better?
Yeah.
A lot better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go with it. And again, thanks for bearing with me. And if it gets
No, we're losing you again. Yeah, do you have a handset, Chris?
Yeah, I actually just went to a cell phone and I was on the handset. The last thing I can try is through the computer, like voice over internet, and see if that's any better.
So what he's doing now, I'll tell you some things I was going to tell you at the end. While we're waiting for that. Bob is looking at how we're going to build a team. Okay, so we're not going to ask the executives to be on part of the peer review team unless you want to. That's strictly because of your time. Okay.
Welcome to GoToMeeting, online meetings made easy. There is one other caller on the call.
Meaning that not all police will be with police to review results attributes. You'll be cross-functional. After Bob does the initial draft, we're going to ask the steering committee to review it before we actually send it out. So you won't actually get assigned your teams until probably the end of next week. That's about the same time you'll be getting your template. If you have a problem, or if you have some concerns on the team that you put on or the results that you've been assigned to, please let me know. What we're going to try to do is avoid you having to score your own department programs. So if you score really heavily in one result attribute, we're probably not going to put you on that results peer group. We'll probably put you on something else. Okay, does that make sense? So, like finance is not probably going to score the governance results because we're heavily governance, right? So, right. So any other questions? No? It's all kind of. Are you back, Chris?
Yeah, I'm trying this again. How does this sound?
Better.
Okay. Man, I'm really frustrated and sorry. Is this better than the last version, or it just comes in and out and totally goes to no sound whatsoever?
So far, this is better.
Okay. Well, maybe we can just go for it and try and get through this while we have connection.
Okay.
Okay. So we were covering the areas where it's not the role of the peer review team. We've discussed not to question the results or the result definitions, and I really like what Paula said. For the future of your process, those observations are critical. Just don't get caught up in it in your review of the programs. That's all. Another one is assessing the overall relevance of the program that you're reviewing, and it ties into assess the program's influence on any of the other results. What you might be tempted to do is you're looking at a program and you feel like this program has to score highly overall, therefore you want it to score highly in your result. The point being, don't artificially change the score of your program against your result, trying to force the program overall into a higher degree of relevance. You only have one result to review, and all of the other teams are going to be reviewing that program, and it's only the conclusion of everybody's review that will determine the overall relevance of the program being reviewed. Another thing that might come up in your discussion is you'll say, I think this program's mandated, so it's got to be a high priority in my result. Well, mandated is its own category. You're reviewing your result. So let the mandated category take care of itself and not necessarily impact your thinking on whether or not the program has an impact on the result that you're reviewing. The process will work if you just stay focused on your particular result. And then lastly, taking a look at the program's costs or efficiencies. Again, another thing that we've seen in peer review that takes place is you're looking at your program, you're looking at the result, and a question pops up. The program has an influence on the result, but it could be done far more efficiently. And so it starts to make you want to downscore the program when that's not a part of the review. The only question at hand is, does the program have an influence on the result, yes or no? We're going to definitely get into whether or not the program could be delivered more efficiently. But in terms of the program score, you're only asking the question about its relevance, its influence. Okay, so Paula was talking more about format, and we have one team for each of the results. We would recommend that you go ahead and assign a facilitator to your group, and the facilitator's role would be to just make sure that the discussions are on track, that they're taking notes. The facilitator can 100% participate in all the discussions going on, and you don't need a facilitator. We've just seen it work well if someone is assigned to just keeping the team on track, making sure that the discussion is moving forward. You submit one final worksheet with your team set of recommended scores for each of the programs being reviewed. So many of you might have all of your own notes, but ultimately you're only responsible, just like in program scoring, for submitting one final sheet. Now, sometimes a question comes up, well, what if there's still like a hung jury for a few programs? We don't have a rule for that. Most teams will say that they do the democratic process. If the majority of the team feels like the program deserves a 4, and a couple people believe that the program deserves a 3, sometimes it's the best thing to do if you just can't sort it out or come to agreement, you might go ahead and move forward with the 4. There's no averages. There's no 3.5 that goes for the program overall. Try to push for its final score. And then lastly, we note that if there are significant differences between what your peer review team recommends for a final score and the score assigned by the department, we're going to flag those on our end. We need to be very concerned ultimately if there's just a huge difference of opinion. Your team feels like the program deserves a 0 and the department scored it as a 4. We're trying to make sure, was it just misinterpreted by one group or another, and how do we bring that to the attention of Paula and the team to make sure that we're noticing these programs, and then likely coming back to peer review and coming back to the department to find out what is appropriate. We need to get the most accurate scores that we can to come out of this. So again, we'll be looking for those major differences, and it's also a recommendation to you as peer review participants. Don't be afraid of changing scores if that's what your team feels. If you're reviewing this and you're trying to stay as true to the process as possible, even if you have a tremendously different opinion of the program's influence than the department gave, that's totally okay. And again, we'll make sure that those programs are taken a look at. Okay, a couple more tips in your work in peer review, and we actually want to go back to the same set of instructions that we were giving when you entered program scoring, and then turn it around so that everybody can see it from the role of peer review. Remember the scoring scale. We have the 0 to 4, where you have 3s and 4s that indicate a higher degree of relevance. You have 1s and 2s, which are a lower degree of relevance, and a 0, no clear connection. Sometimes in your work as a team, you're going to get stumped on whether you agree with a program score. One piece of advice that we have is to see, can you simplify your effort to at least move on in the conversation And can you say, well, do we at least agree that it's a high degree of relevance? In other words, we all can agree that it's either a 4 or a 3. We're just not sure which one it should be. Let yourself say, we think it's a high degree of relevance and we're going to move on, but ultimately we're going to come back to this program and have a final discussion, or at least come to agreement, we think it's a lower degree of relevance. So basically, you're taking the 0 to 4 scoring scale and reducing the complexity of it to 3 categories: no clear connection, low degree of relevance, or high degree of relevance. And it makes your life simpler to be able to move on past an obstacle in your work and come back to it later. It's still progress. Another tip that we gave in the program scoring process was to ask the question, let's pretend that we no longer provided this program. Is it going to be significantly difficult or impossible to achieve the result? If the answer to that question is yes, you're imagining this program's gone and it's going to have a huge impact on our ability to achieve the result, then you know it's going to fall into that high degree of impact, or most likely it will. If your answer is no, that you're looking at the result map and you understand the program and you say, I think we're going to do just fine. This program does not have that degree of impact. Then your team can say, well, it's probably going to be in that lower area and quite possibly no connection overall, and you can move on. Again, these are just tips if you're getting stuck in your conversations to be able to ask these questions in hopes that it's going to facilitate progress in your work. And the other scoring tip that we gave was going through each result definition one by one and asking the question, do we think that it has an impact on the first result definition? How about the second? How about the third? And literally reading it out loud. We've seen this work very well, especially when you're starting your work. This is going to feel like a foreign exercise when you get started with it. And one of the easiest ways to begin your work overall in peer review is to just take the first program off your list and go through each of those result definitions and ask, do we think the program has some degree of impact overall in this result definition? We walked through that in the program scoring guidance workshop. Do the exact same thing in peer review, and you'll start to get a groove. You'll start to get momentum as you're learning how to review these programs. It's really helpful. Okay, a couple other major pieces of advice. You see this first one, we say, don't be afraid of changing a score. 1 point higher or lower won't send the program spiraling to the bottom or rocketing to the top. We can't make this point enough. Sometimes we've heard from people participating in peer review that the responsibility that you have of changing a program score can feel uncomfortable. That you feel like, I don't want to be responsible overall for downscoring a program if it means that this program is going to now go to the bottom of prioritization, and then there's going to be some sort of discussion about, should we do this program anymore? Don't burden yourself with that overall responsibility. We know that you feel it. You're taking this process seriously, as you should. This is you're really being invited into something that's pretty significant. But in terms of your task on peer review, your action of downscoring a program will not cause the program to launch down to the bottom of the process, nor will it cause it to go rocketing to the top. That's our point. It takes many different result teams downscoring that program before it's actually going to change a quartile overall. So we just wanted to ease your minds a little bit, take your work seriously, but don't feel like your action is going to lead to the fate of the program overall. And also remember, none of this in the end is formulaic. Even if you end up with a low quartile program, there's no formula that says there's any fate for that program. Again, we talked about this, and I should probably not bring it back up because Paula did a better job of explaining it than I did, but concentrating on the scores of the programs, reviewing everything, programs with scores of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and as time permits, if there's time to look at the zeros, certainly take the time to do it. This last one is more technical, but you'll see on the worksheet that there's a space to enter in the score that you are recommending as a team, and I'll just flash to it. It's this area highlighted in yellow. On your worksheet, you're going to get the department, the program name, the program description, the score, some ability to generate some basic notes. Do we agree with this score? Are we going to ask for more information? Some other notes that you're keeping track of. And then lastly, what is that final score? We're just, as a technical recommendation, if you can enter in the actual score that you're recommending, that helps us as we're reviewing all this work and trying to turn it around quickly. What happens so many times is that if you agree with this score, sometimes they don't write anything there, trying to imply that you're not recommending any sort of change. And as we compile all this information, a blank cell will actually appear as a 0 to us. So that can cause some confusion. So thanks for filling in the final score on your sheet before you turn it in overall. Okay, a little bit earlier I was describing a path to completion that we've seen helpful for the teams, and you don't have to adhere to this exactly, but something like this can be effective. And here's the idea. Over a course of 4, maybe 5 meetings, we think you can get through this work where none of these meetings are lasting more than an hour and a half to 2 hours at the max. And we see many result teams finishing their work in 3 meetings, maybe a 4th meeting if necessary. But this is what you should generally plan on as you're scoping out your work, trying to schedule meetings with your team. Why do we say don't make the meetings last longer than an hour and a half to 2 hours? We have seen a couple of organizations try to take on their peer review effort in just one massive session. People are going to get together at 8 in the morning and they're going to work and work until they finish their review and then they're done. It hasn't worked that well. And part of the reason we think, as we've watched it unfold, is that you get tired after about 2 hours. You're having great conversations. You're being very thorough. You're being very thoughtful in your review of the programs for about the first hour, hour and a half. And then your objective changes from a genuine, authentic review of the programs to, we got to get out of here. This meeting's lasting forever. So past 2 hours, you start to get fatigued. The conversation wanes. And then the accuracy of your program review goes down the tube. So try to take it and pace yourself and be as efficient as possible. Obviously, we know this is taking up your time, but here's how we think you can get through it. If you approach meeting 1, you've studied your result map, and you've taken it upon yourselves maybe as homework to take a look at those programs and start to even think through, are there any that we automatically agree on? Are there any that in my homework assignment I can look at and say, I feel pretty comfortable with that score. I don't know anything else about the program, but that seems reasonable to me. And then here are a group of programs that I know I'm going to have some questions. If you approach that first meeting, and then in that meeting, you and your team are going through each of those programs, you might find that for all of you, you all agree on a few of them already, and that's great. Your work is done for those programs. Move them to the side. You might all look at the programs and agree, yes, these are programs that we're going to need some more information from the department. Those are great. Take the time for those programs and work with the facilitator to generate the list of questions that you have about the programs. What information is it that you would need or want to have that is going to make it easier for you to score your programs? And what we'd recommend is you reach out to the departments, is that so much of this can be handled through email or through a phone call. If you can get clear about the questions that you want to answer, try to handle it that way. It's for the sake of efficiency. Sometimes, however, you have a lot of questions for a department, or you have questions about many programs, and it is actually helpful to have somebody from the department come into your group and make somewhat of a presentation, not anything big or formal, but just providing information about their justification. Why did they score the program in the way that they did? What we'd encourage you is schedule those department interactions if you actually have people coming to your meeting, or if you're just reviewing all the information that you've collected. Schedule those for meetings 2 and 3. You're reviewing information. You're trying to push towards a final recommendation. If you invite a department to come and talk to you, try to keep those meetings short. They're not coming to persuade you, convince you, and then together you're going to come up with a final score while they're in the room. Keep it brief. Have them come in, give their justification. Now you have some information to consider, and then they can go away. And that's the most effective that we've seen this work. So if you're doing your information gathering, you're having your discussions in meeting 2 and 3, then you come back, and with that information, were we able to answer our questions? Can we move to final scores? And hopefully, by about the end of meeting 3 and possibly meeting 4, you have come to agreement on all of the programs. The very last meeting, and this is what Paula was mentioning earlier, we strongly recommend, we call it a relativity test. Were you consistent in your effort? What we recommend is that you go back and review all of the scores that you've now given and ask yourselves, were we consistent in the programs that we gave 4s? Were we consistent in the programs that we gave 3s, 2s, 1s, and even 0s? What happens when you do that is you come across a few programs where it's clear to you, oh, we had a breakthrough in our meeting, we scored this program one way earlier, but based on what we have learned, we might actually give it a different score. It's for consistency, and that's the last bit of work that we'd recommend that you do. All right. Apologies for the audio difficulties, but that is the general approach and our recommendations for peer review. I know we're getting close to the end of the hour, and I just wanted to make sure to take some time if you had some questions.
Any last minute questions for Chris before we let him go? No? Okay. So in that first meeting, I am more than happy to attend with your group to help you start to facilitate. So if you have questions, or if you want me there in that first meeting to help you get going, just let me know, and we can definitely fit that in my schedule. So if you leave this meeting and you have questions about the process, please call me. We will be providing the presentation along with the video link to you and those who didn't attend today for a refresher. Like I said earlier, your groups, the groups are going to be made up of no more than 3 or 4 people in a group, and we should have those to you with your templates by the end of next week. Okay. If you have some concerns about the grouping, come see me or call me or send me an email. Okay. So that's it. So I'm asking the budget analyst to stay. So if you're responsible for the budget in your department, please stay for a couple of minutes. I'd like to talk to you. But that is, that's it.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Jerry.